Therefore it says, wake up, sleeper. Get up from the dead. Christ will shine on you. So be careful to live your life wisely, not foolishly. Take advantage of every opportunity because these are evil times. Because of this, don't be ignorant, but understand the Lord's will. Saints of God, my eyes have seen the glory and the coming of the Lord. He's trampling out the village where the grapes of wrath are stored. He hath loosed the faithful lightning of his terrible swift sword. His truth is marching on. I see him in the watchfires of 100 circling camps. They have builded him an altar in the evening dew and damps. I can read his righteous sentence by the dim and flaring lamps. His day is marching on. And hello, welcome to Conversation with Faith Leaders. This is Dr. Brandon A.J. Davis, founder and host of Conversation with Faith Leaders and content writing service. And I am delighted to be live today with one of my favorite, do you hear me? I said favorite preachers, prognosticators, bishops of the Lord's Church, the Right Reverend Timothy Joseph Clarke. Listen, if you don't know Bishop Clarke, you need to go ahead and slide over to Google, put his name in, go over to Amazon, get his book, amazing as my grandma called it. Go get his book, then go check out The First Church. I love that name, The First Church. The First Church of Columbus, Ohio, and check out Bishop Timothy Clarke. It has to have been over a decade ago that I was introduced to this guy and did not know the immediate connections we had. This is one of those persons you can't fool. You can't like lie to him just to, get in good with him. Be honest, because he'll pick up the phone to verify your story. I'm sitting in a restaurant across the street from Trinity Theological Seminary with one of my closest friends, Dr. Yvette Lovett Martin. We graduated from the D-Men program at United Theological Seminary together. We just happened to be in the winter studying, trying to get those dissertation papers written. We're talking, and she says, I know Bishop Clarke personally. You want to have lunch with him? I was like, nah, he's not going to eat with us. She said, let me call him. And in good fashion, Bishop showed up, took us to lunch, paid the bill, and we got to talking about his Pittsburgh connection. And I said, well, my pastor and father of the ministry is Reverend Dr. Alphonse Allen, Jr. And he says, hold on, picks up the phone, calls the man, calls friend by her name. And I'm like, yeah, this is good people. I called my pastor when we leave, and my pastor said, oh, son, you in high cotton because you get to have lunch with Bishop Clarke. One of the most humble, honest, loving persons, a sincere preacher, a true prognosticator of the gospel. You can't beat Bishop Clarke. So for those of you who haven't heard him, just take a few minutes, literally a few minutes, and listen to this amazing preacher.
Weeping May. Okay, I'm going back over here because y'all. No, nephew, should I stay here? Weeping May. I want to drop something on you. Can you, if I put it down, will you pick it up? Stop letting what is supposed to be temporary last forever. Oh God. Oh God. Oh God. I feel like going to work. I feel like going to work. No, weeping may. It doesn't have to. You've been weeping long enough. You've been crying long enough. You've been wallowing in your self-pity long enough. It didn't say it will. It said it may. I want to say something, but I'm afraid to. Would you holler at the neighbor, tell him it's your choice? You can dry them tears, blow your nose, wipe your eyes, wash your face. Weeping, if I were not intimidated by Bishop Jakes and Dr. James, I would argue homiletically, hermeneutically, exegetically, that the choice is yours. Somebody just holler, I cried my last tear last night on. No, just, come on, just do this. Just do that just do that real quick. And say, that's the last one I'm crying over her. That's the last one I'm crying over him. That's the last one I'm crying. Wait a minute. Weeping, I gotta hurry. I got a plane to catch. Weeping may. Notice the temporary tangential nature of weeping. It may. Here's the shout. Y'all may want to keep standing because you're going to jump back up in a minute. Weeping may endure for the night, but conjunction, joy comes in the morning. In other words, weeping is temporary and it is determined by your response, but joy is sure. Oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God. Joy is sure. Somebody holler, get your joy. Go get your joy.
Folks, listen. I got Bishop Clarke with me today. Will you please welcome the great and the amazing, the incomparable, God's anointed preacher, Bishop Timothy Joseph Clarke. Bishop Clarke, how you doing?
Man, listen, I want you to know I'm already tall, but I feel taller now that I've been in your presence. And I don't want to make this a mutual admiration society, but I'm going to go on the record to say, you know, I love me some you.
Yes, sir.
I'll tell you, like Bishop Jakes often says, I love you like a big boy love chocolate cake.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And so just know that day, in fact, that restaurant doesn't exist anymore, I don't think. Now, I think they changed it to something else. But I want you to know that was a pivotal moment. And I had heard about you in the hearing of the ear, but I was so honored to meet you. You're a churchman, and that touches me because I believe in the church with all of my heart. So it's an honor to be with you. I love you. I respect you. So proud of the ministry you've carved for yourself, for the AME church, but for the broader, wider church as well.
Bishop, thank you so much. Is you have no idea. When I was going through my moment of being displaced from ministry,
Yes.
I came to Payne's, I guess you would call it that baccalaureate service.
Yes.
And you was the preacher that night. And I had just not too long ago had my surgery. And I said, I'm getting out the house. I'm going to hear Bishop Clarke. And I drove over to Dayton, and it was just a bunch of stuff happening that day, motions and feelings going awry. And when I saw that you was in the room, I was like, there's the preacher. And man, you hugged me and hugged me like a father hugged a son. And that just it did something for me. And then of course hearing you preach live, I mean, it's Bishop, I'm here to tell you, man, if nobody go holler, I'm gonna holler, and then I'm gonna walk
Yes,
up and
sir.
scream at you. Bishop, you are one of the people that a lot of young pastors have been able to come to and not feel disrespected or rejected or picked on because they had questions.
Yes, sir.
And so, and it's why I've been trying to get a hold of you for the past year,
Yes, sir.
because after the death of Archbishop Jesse Delano Ellis, I knew that we needed to have something saved
Yes, sir.
where we having conversations with church fathers and church mothers. And I've been able to pull this series of conversations together. And I told Mama Fran, I got to get Bishop. And she said, well, he's busy, but I'm sure he will get back in touch with you. And I said, I have no doubt about it. I said, but I pray the Lord hurries that up, because Bishop, we are in a strange place.
Yes, sir. Yes,
The
sir.
church is in a strange place. Well, before we delve into that, I want to ask you this. Can you tell us about your ministry formation, your career journey, and the influential voices in your life and ministry?
Wow. Wow. I'll be glad to, because anyone who knows me knows that I spend quite a bit of time in my preaching, my teaching, and just my conversations talking about mentors and models, father figures in my own journey. Almost everyone knows that my mom and dad were not married when I was born. So I was born in what they would call out of wedlock. But God providentially placed me in a context, both in my home with my mother, my aunt, my grandmother, I should say because there were others as well, but also in a church family, First Church of God, Far Rockaway, New York. And the pastor there was Dr. James E. Cray. And he really became my dad, and I called him dad. And he treated me like a son. Interestingly enough, there were other pastors, both in Rockaway, Dr. H. Oliver Scott Sr. at the First Baptist Church, Elder Howard Kelly at H. Kelly Temple Church of God in Christ, whose son is now my executive pastor. We grew up together. And those men, Dr. William Aaron, Dr. Evans, Bromley, Marshall, the list could go on and on. Bishop Benjamin Franklin Reed, Dr. Horace Wesley Shepherd, men who impacted my life in marvelous, profound, powerful, permanent ways. It's why I believe in mentoring younger pastors. Dr. Davis, it's why any young preacher has a friend, a confidant, a father, big brother in me, because I was well fathered. I need to say this. Having been well fathered, it put on me not just the onus, but the desire to give to others the wonderful gift that was given to me. And so it was out of that nurturing, it was out of that tutelage, it was out of that mentoring and modeling that I saw ministry at its best. And then, of course, I'm a child of the 60s. And so you got to remember Malcolm was at his zenith. Dr. King was at his zenith. Adam Clayton Powell, because I'm from New York, was the congressman from Harlem, pastor of the Abyssinian Baptist Church. In Brooklyn, you had Dr. Sandy Frederick Ray, Dr. Gardner Calvin Taylor, Dr. William Augustus Jones, Bishop F.D. Washington, Bishop Reuben L. Speaks. And the list could just go on and on and on and on. And so I grew up breathing, imbibing the atmosphere and the ear of great Black preaching. And my life is the better because of it and for it.
Bishop, let me tell you, you just called the name of one of my icons. Listen, I am a huge fan of the Right Honorable Adam Clayton Powell.
Yes, sir.
That's my dude.
Yes,
I
sir.
was telling a group of friends, I was telling Amy Anderson, Derek Anderson's wife. I was telling Doctor, she said, Brandon, what you think I ought to say now that I'm reappointed back to my church? I said, well, say what Adam said when they didn't think he was coming back to Harlem because of the lawsuit and the contempt of court with the woman he called a bag lady for the mafia.
Sir. Yes, sir.
He walked in the back of Abba and said, niggas, I'm back.
Doc was something.
Let me tell you something.
He was something.
But he was one of those touchable leaders.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
You could walk into a bar, a restaurant, on the street corner.
Yes, sir.
If you read his autobiography, The King of the Cats.
Yes, sir.
He talks about how at the lowest of his life, after he was done with Congress, after he had already resigned from the church, he was just at a low point in his life trying to find purpose. He was walking out of a bar and it was cold in New York that day. And he didn't have a coat.
Right.
He just grabbed a coat that was hanging, put it on, and walked out.
Yes, sir.
But imagine nobody was probably upset. They was probably honored that Adam Clayton Powell was wearing their coat.
Yes, sir.
Because that's the kind of leader he was.
Yes,
and let me say to my buddy, my good friend, Darnell D. Lee Jr., listen, inbox Bishop Clarke. He says he would like to have that relationship. Inbox Bishop Clarke.
Please
I can tell you he will respond to you.
Yes, sir.
He'll get back to you.
Yes,
that's
sir.
the kind of person he is.
Yes, sir.
But my sister Tina, she loved your point. Being fathered is what people need. That's visible fire. That's
yes, sir.
Children who grow up in broken homes end up clinging to pastoral leadership, some in a negative, not so good way, others in a way that impacts their life. I know who my dad is.
Yes, sir.
I know who Donna Ray Davis is. I know who my mother is, who birthed me, Belinda Ann Quinn. But there's been a struggle in the development of that relationship. And when I was a child going through some uncomfortable things, it was Reverend and Mrs. Tony Mills, who was appointed to my home church in Warsaw, North Carolina, when I was a child.
Yes, sir.
Who just connected with me. And in doing so, they've been mom and dad for almost 30 years.
Wow.
I have a room at their house.
Wow.
When I go home, I stay in Richlands, North Carolina.
Yes, sir.
When I was 14, I met Michael and Carolyn Kerr. Same situation.
Yes, sir.
You can't tell Michael and Carolyn Kerr that I'm not their child.
Yes, sir.
Behind this green screen is pictures of us. Every year we take family portraits.
Wow. Wow.
Bishop, having that connection, I think, which prompts this next question, I think that's what helps to keep young ministers within perspective of trying to do ministry in an age and society where they come from brokenness themselves.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You know, and you're familiar with this. You are one of the true doctors of the church. I was teasing a friend of mine the other day, and I was preaching. I had to go to New Jersey Saturday to preach a pastor's funeral. And so I was in the office of the pastor, and I said, oh, this is my first time seeing your diploma. He had just gotten his D-Min a few months ago. And I had been to his church. I go every year, but I hadn't been since his commencement, since graduation. And so I said, look at it. It looks good. I said to somebody standing there, I said, now that is not donated dignity. That's earned.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. This is not a DD didn't do it.
That's not donated dignity. And you are a true doctor of the church. So I'm not going to say anything you don't know. You know what Henry Nouwen talks about
Yeah.
being wounded healers.
Yes, sir.
And that how, and it's Christological in a sense. He was wounded for our transgression, he was bruised for our iniquity. The chastisement that should have been put upon us was put on him, and by his stripes we are healed. So Christ is wounded for us. And Henry Nouwen says if we are effective, we do so to the degree that we are wounded healers. The issue, though, Doc, and I say this in love, and I hope no one who's on now or who may watch it later will be offended. The issue is when we do not find a way to let the wound be healed, because it is only really out of woundedness that we have found healing for ourselves, that we can then go help someone else. You know, you've seen this, you've read this, that years ago, years and years, decades ago, the infant mortality rate in Europe and America was extremely high. Babies were dying at an alarming rate, and they could not figure out. Healthy mother, healthy child, child would die. Here is what they discovered. A doctor looking into it, alarmed by it, discovered something, that the attending physicians many times did not wash their hands. And so while reaching to bring the baby out of the birth canal, would transport dirt and filth and germs on the mother and the baby. And very often one would die or both. And that began the process of surgeons. You know, they wash their hands where the water falls down, or wearing gloves. And the rate of mortality instantly began to go down. Now stay with me. You may have to get me off, because I may offend.
Now roll on, Bishop.
Here's the thing. That's true in the physiological, in the natural. Every Sunday we got preachers with dirty hands trying to give birth.
Bishop.
Trying to give birth. And what we're doing is we're killing it before the life comes up. And somebody just said, we're guilty of spiritual malpractice, because we are touching what is being birthed and born, but hands and heart are dirty. And so, yes, we are wounded healers, but let me say this, man, and I mean this, we've got to be careful that we don't use that as a crutch and an excuse for proclivities that do not allow us to function the way we ought to function.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Bishop, you already, good night. We 24 minutes in and you already killing us. I mean, yes. Man, you know, let me just go ahead. I'm gonna quit, because we're gonna get stuck here, and it's gonna turn into something else. I'll be crying and shouting in a second. From your no, that's not the question I want to ask. In the current period of the Black church, what are the intellectual, social, and political challenges facing the church?
Wow. Yeah, that's a great question. And let me deal with each of them: intellectual, societal, and geopolitical. All right. I think first intellectual. And we live in a world, we live in a nation, we live in a time when wisdom, knowledge, information has not only multiplied, it has expanded. Right now, I'm going to hold up my phone. This is my phone, right? And I read about 5-6 years ago something, literally when I read it, it blew me out the chair. It said this, that the technology, 1969, I believe August of 1969, when man landed on the moon, safely went to the moon, landed, and they walked around the moon. Neil Armstrong and them walked on the surface of the moon, safely entered Earth's orbit, landed, and lived a long time. Watch this. Watch this. Hey, Doc, B, watch this. There's more technology on this phone,
yes, sir,
than was on that spacecraft.
Yes, sir.
That blew, I fell out the chair. In my hand, I have more technology than took man to the moon and brought him safely back. That is how much information has accelerated. Therefore, those of us who preach and stand in the pulpit, men and women, must understand the intellectual expansiveness of the congregation we preach to. Yesterday I was preaching and I made a point, and I said, all right, I said, now you can Google this. And I said, wait a minute, not now, when you go home. Because I know folk are Googling while you're preaching. Yes, and sir. So we must have, watch this, intellectual integrity when we're preaching. Yes, because sir. the abundance, the plethora of information that inundates our worshipers, our congregants every day, bombarded with this information deluge, that is an intellectual assault at
yes, sir.
times, and the pulpit has to deal with that. Socially, someone said of our society, hey, Doc, look who's on, the Reverend Dr. Yvette Lovett Martin.
She just texted me, how do I comment?
Well, what someone said one time about the state of our world, that biologically we are sick, mathematically we are in error, and musically we are out of tune. That's the state of our society.
Yes, sir.
Racism, classism, culturalism, sexism, all the isms that daily come against, assault the soul and spirit of men and women, impacting culture and society. The pulpit, the church, has to find a way to speak. Now watch this, please. God help me not get my little brother in trouble. Not just speak to it, speak into it.
Yes, sir.
See, you got to speak truth to power. I'll never forget my friend, Dr. Marvin McMickle, said one time, I brought Dr. McMickle to our national convention. He preached Friday night, lectured on Saturday. And I remember Saturday in the lecture, he said, y'all said tomorrow, well, would have been the next Sunday because that was the closing service on Sunday. So the next Sunday, he said, y'all will go back home and you're going to rail against Ronald Reagan and you're going to rail against the governor and you're going to rail against the mayor. He said, that's real nice, except for one thing. None of them will be sitting in your church.
That's right. That's right.
I said, you know what? You're right. I'm a prophet. I speak prophetically. I speak truth to power. No, speak truth to the folks sitting in your pew who are jacking up the community.
Bishop, yes, sir.
Stop talking about the president. The president won't hear you.
That's right.
But that man will hear you who's abusing his family. That woman will hear you who is struggling with issues of body imaging. That young person will hear you who's trying to weave and work their way through the maze of this new hypersexuality. That's who we have to speak truth to, because the president ain't coming to most of our churches.
That's right. That's right. Unless it's a campaign stop, he's not coming.
He ain't coming.
He's not going to come by. Bishop, thank you for that. And now had I waited, this probably would have extended what I had to write. I've been trying to write this book.
I saw it, Pastor.
I
saw it yesterday. I'm excited about that.
I'm so glad I finally got it done. Everybody's been putting their stuff out. Everybody's writing their books. And I'm like, Brandon, you got something to say, get it done.
Get it done, bro.
There's one section that I was struggling with, one section. And that section was a defense of the preacher. and it was in response to former President Barack Obama's assault on Jeremiah Wright.
Yes, sir. Yes,
and
sir.
with his book in the height of 2020, and then his wife's book came out. Hey, Bishop Bellinger, your colleague.
No, we bow, we genuflect.
Holy Father.
Holy Father,
Father.
we genuflect.
Yes, sir. And so with those two books coming out, with the resurfacing of, the attack on Dr. Wright, I felt like I had to say something.
Yes, you
but
did.
I didn't want to say anything. I like President Obama. I love First Lady Michelle Obama. I mean, I love them, but I had something to say about the fact that you stepped into a place that you wasn't qualified to make comments about.
Yes, sir.
And then you put it in a book that sold millions.
Yes, sir.
The man kept his mouth shut. He didn't say anything to you guys. He didn't say anything about you. The connection was severed and destroyed between you and his children and his children and you and him. And so I wanted to say something, but I did not want people who would read this to think, oh, you just lambasting the former president because he did great things for the culture, and we have to celebrate the culture. But I needed to defend what we do, and what you just said inspired me in another way to maybe write something else. And I do have an article due for the Christian Recorder, so that might be it.
Good.
Bishop, we have to stop speaking as if the president is going to hear us, or to the mayor, if the mayor is going to hear us, because they're not attending our churches. We do have to speak truth to power to the people sitting in our pews.
Yes, sir.
And we have to do it in such a way that people can understand this is what being a prophet is.
Yes,
Amos didn't care about what Amaziah had to say.
There you go.
He didn't care how he felt about it.
There you go.
God doesn't care. I made a statement yesterday that we have to find the faith to accept God's prerogative to inflict suffering in our lives sometimes.
Yes, sir.
God didn't consult Job. God didn't get his permission. God chooses to do what God chooses to do with us.
Yes, sir.
And if we're going to be prophets, we have to sometimes speak that truth to people.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And I'll say this. I've been around the track a few times, and I've been with this company quite a long while. Here's what I believe, and God has marvelously blessed First Church in the 4 decades I've been here, that we have some of the most impactful political leaders, public servants in the city, state, county. But here's what I need to say in light of that. It wasn't always that way. We were a very small church when I came, less than 100 people. But I kept preaching to those people. Watch this. The governor, the mayor, the president didn't hear me when I was doing it. But I was preaching to those people like the prophet spoke to those dry bones.
Yes, sir.
And then they came together. Watch this. And pretty soon the mayor and the governor and the president heard about us. See, that's the difference. You become light and salt right there in Aliquippa as you keep preaching the way you've been talking about, feeling now that you have finally tapped into a vein of pastoral preaching. That empowers your people, and they go back to their homes, their jobs, their communities, and pretty soon people start hearing about it because they are becoming it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Bishop, we're going to take a quick break for one of my sponsors, and then we'll be right back.
Yes, sir.
Praise him with a violin.
Welcome. I'm Alphonse Allen, the senior pastor of Allen Temple AME Church.
And I'm personal injury attorney Blake Maislin, partnering together to bring you the Allen Temple broadcast.
Allen Temple, reaching the city one soul at a time. Every Sunday morning at 8 on the CW Cincinnati.
And now we're inviting you to join us.
Every Sunday morning at 8 on the CW Cincinnati.
I have Bishop Timothy Clarke, the senior pastor of First Church of God in Columbus, and he's already blessing us today. Bishop, how has the church, more specifically the Black church, exchanged its culture and biblical principles for acceptance among non-churchgoers?
First of all, before I go any further, I was so glad to see my brother and sister, your mom and dad, Alphonse and
Yes,
Fran
sir.
Allen. You know, I love me. We go back to when they were in Shenango Valley.
Yes, sir.
Now
Yes,
that's
sir.
how far I go back with them. And there are not two more people that I love more than I love and honor and respect them. Let me say this. Saturday, I preached the eulogy of Dr. John H. Hall, who for 50 years pastored the Church of God in Elizabeth, New Jersey. And in the eulogy, I opened up by talking about one of the responsibilities and burdens of a preacher is for he or she to engage and embrace the tension in a text. And I think that's true as we try to parse the role of the church now, because there is a sense in which Paul says it. We become all things to all people that we might win some. Now this is where our hermeneutic and our exegesis must come into play. The Apostle Paul takes his pen and says, I have become all things to all people that I might win some. That same Apostle Paul dips that same pen in some ink and says, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. I want to tell Paul, make up your mind.
Yes, sir.
Which one is it? See, that's the dichotomy. That's the tension. How do I touch the culture, embrace the culture, I'm in air quotations, embrace the culture, while at the same time not being assimilated into the culture? Therein lies the difference. A conundrum, but a difference. I am to love everyone. I am to be able to see others with the imago Dei and treat them with respect. But at the same time, I do not in any way capitulate to the culture so that I become assimilated into it.
Yes, sir. And you know, Bishop, let me say, I think the struggle for most millennial preachers is trying to be true to the culture, but at the same time dictate to the culture biblical moral and
Yes,
principles that the culture is fighting against.
Yes, sir.
I think it's called post-traumatic slavery syndrome.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Where African Americans have been diagnosed to have this innate, born with understanding or feeling or emotion, if you will, that because of what our ancestors and generations of us suffered from in slavery, now that we have experienced what we call freedom, we don't want nobody telling us what to do, not even the church, not even God.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
We want to be free to do what we want to do, but when it comes to the church, people get into these fights, these unnecessary fights of trying to understand culture while at the same time be obedient to scripture.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah. Well, you know, was it? I think it was Reinhold Niebuhr. I always get he and Richard mixed up on this.
Yeah.
But I think it was Reinhold who said, I've quoted this so many times. Sometimes Christ is in culture, working. Sometimes Christ is outside of culture, working. But whether in or out, Christ is always above the culture. And that is what those of us who are heralds of the gospel must understand. Sometimes we can engage the culture and be called upon to participate and work within the context and confines of the culture. Other times we have to stand like a true prophet, like Dr. King, and like Malcolm, and like Harriet Tubman, and like Fannie Lou Hamer.
Yes, sir.
We must stand outside the culture, like Dorothy Heights, and speak truth into it, not just to it, but into it.
Yes, sir.
And stand there firmly, even though we're not always understood and not always applauded, not always appreciated. And that, again, is tension, but we've got to be comfortable living with that tension.
And Bishop, that tension is necessary.
Oh, God, yeah.
It's necessary because Dr. Augman, who taught me at Payne Theological Seminary, Bill Augman.
Oh, the late Bill Augman.
You know Bill Augman.
You know
Dr. Augman, he would say, now put some flesh on that, son.
Put some flesh on that.
And the struggle that society has is that if you say anything against the culture, then you're deemed to be against the culture.
Yes, sir.
But like you just said, sometimes we are called to be above the culture, and being above the culture to speak truth into the culture, because culture is learned behavior.
Yes, sir.
You know, it's instructed, it's taught, it's lived. And if we continue down this destructive path of, you know, I'm not saying you shouldn't question anything, but if you question everything, then there is no semblance for truth, because you're going to question that. If Jesus says, love your neighbor more than you love yourself, and then you want to question, well, why should I love my neighbor more than I love me? Me is important to me.
Right.
But then where do you find a relationship with truth?
Yes, sir. Well, it's the question of the young lawyer who comes to Jesus, which prompts Jesus to tell the parable of the Good Samaritan. And who is my neighbor?
Yeah.
You know, it's amazing to me. He quotes what the law, the Torah, says you should do. You should love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, all your soul, all your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. Well, now you quoted it, but then he wants to raise the query of, well, who is my neighbor? See, that's where the culture wants to sometimes play these games. But I was thinking when you were talking earlier about, and I don't know whether you took any courses with him, if he was there when you were matriculating, Dr. Aubrey Hendricks.
Oh, yes, sir.
In his book, you know, Christians Against Christianity. Because sometimes we are the very, you know, you have these climate deniers, these election deniers. Well, sometimes we have truth deniers.
Yes, sir. Yes,
you
sir.
know, we have Bible deniers. And Dr. Hendricks argues that in a way now Christianity is turned on Christianity.
That's right. That's right. And everybody, and it's not as Dr. McMichael has written in one of his recent articles in Cleveland.
Yes, sir.
About Christian nationalism.
Oh man.
So we want to convince people that not only do you think Jesus to be blonde-haired, blue-eyed, and all that other stuff, that other colonial identity. You want Jesus to be an American hippie.
Yep.
He rocks out with a bandana. You know, he's for the Republican Party.
Oh, yes, sir.
And he's for white people. And you don't want nobody to tell you that you guys are wrong, that this is racist, it's against scripture. This is, in fact, what the reason why we are where we are is because this is what your ancestors did, taking a form of the truth and then twisting it and turning it to resemble what you want it to look like.
Yes, sir.
This is why we are where we are.
Yes, sir. Yes.
And you're considered to be an enigma to the culture of Christianity if you speak out against it.
Yeah.
We have preachers that can't even stand for us to talk about liberation theology.
Oh God, yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, I am. You know, it's so sad. I remember having a discussion. I just ended my term as chairman of the General Assembly of the Church of God. And I remember a discussion with a group of pastors who were actually arguing over the definition of justice and whether or not that was a biblical paradigm motif, because they felt like it had been co-opted by radicals. I smiled. I said to them, I said, you know, my grandma told me one time, the more things change, the more they stay the same. I said, that's the same argument that caused Dr. King to slip out of the Birmingham jail through the hands of the late Dr. Wyatt T. Walker, strips of paper that later became the letter from the Birmingham jail. It was white preachers who attacked him and told him he was an outsider, an agitator, that he was an interloper, and that they should calm down, cool down, and take their time. Gradualism. And Dr. King responded that real change never rolls in on ability.
Yes,
it has to be forced at times. So what we're seeing, Doc, is really a redressing of an old story, play, and song that we thought had gone off Broadway, was in vaudeville, or had just stopped altogether. The curtain had fallen. But now we're discovering there's a revival of it, and it's back on the stage again.
Yes, it is. You know, I was trying to think of who was a preacher. You know, I love what you said in that sermon at Bishop Jason's church. The 10 jilled nature.
Yes, sir.
Consider it stolen.
Yes, sir. You got it.
The next time I'm dealing with a 10 jilled nature of a 10. Bishop Clarke said that notice here.
One time. One time.
Yes,
and
sir.
Then it's, as I always say.
Look, I'm gonna give you credit, but then it's gone. That's gonna be my new line.
Yes,
but
sir.
It's good for Dr. Vernon Napoleon Johns.
Yes, sir.
Who pastored Dexter Avenue Baptist Church before Dr. King. He wrote a sermon. It was good for us to be here.
Yes, sir.
And in that sermon, Mountaintop Experiences, that was the original name, he made a point, it was good for us to be here. It's good for us to be in this place to where we're questioning the culture, because sometimes culture has to change. It can't always remain the same. Dr. King, you mentioned earlier, people don't even read this part of history, that Dr. King, to the American Psychology Association in Washington, D.C., 1968, during the summer riots, 1967, Dr. King made the statement that we're going to have to start looking at these protests as social responses.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And there are so many different forms of social protests within the life of the church that are taking place where people are looking for something that's different, which brings me to this question. Please share with us your thoughts about the rapid growth and the use of ecclesiastical titles, covenant organizations, and positions. And does any of that stuff reflect God's will, or is it just personal grandstanding?
Well, this was such a good conversation until just now. Until just now.
Emilio Alvarez's book about the Pentecostal church.
Yes, sir.
He's next,
sir. Yes, sir. Before I delve into that, jump into the deep end of the pool on that, let me say a word about what you mentioned, Dr. King said. Because
yes, sir, please do.
About 3 weeks ago, I was in Cleveland, Ohio on a Sunday night, preaching for the opening worship service for the new year for one of the Baptist pastors conferences. Hey, your mama Fran, my sister, is on. I love you.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. So I was preaching for them, and I talked about Dr. King and how we had to rescue Dr. King from this reinvention, reinterpretation, and reduction of him to make him sanitized and safe. Because the only thing folk want to know about Dr. King is 63, I have a dream. 68, I've been to the mountaintop. They don't want to know nothing else before them. Where do we go from here, community or chaos? They don't want to hear him talk about what you just mentioned. And when he said in that same speech that riots are often the voices of the unheard.
That's right. That's
that
right.
it boils up, it swells up, it becomes volcanic, and it's the unheard, it's the unrecognized, it's the marginalized, and as a result, at some point, like a tea kettle, it just blows its lid.
Yes,
So
it
I
does.
appreciate you giving that, because I think sometimes we have to rescue our heroes and sheroes. I saw I shouldn't say this. I saw an article on Facebook that just made me sick to my stomach. Somebody was arguing that Harriet Tubman was a failure. She should have brought more folk out, and she only brought out people. It was the weirdest thing I ever heard in my life. We have to rescue our heroes and sheroes from that foolishness. Whether it's Malcolm, where people want to make him a racist and a demagogue, or Dr. King, people want to make him passive and almost inanimate so that you don't touch him, or others of our great heroes and sheroes, to make them something of icons, statues, as it were, that we venerate, but we don't follow and emulate. So I want to say, I think you bringing that up was so powerful.
Stay right there, Bishop. Stay right there before you answer the question number 4. Stay right there, because what I've struggled with is the part of his speech to the APA where he said it's hard to tell the Negro who's never owned anything that what they're doing is wrong. Yes. The protests of the summer riots wasn't just about looting.
Yeah.
It was about being heard. You won't listen to me. You won't hear me when I'm crying and begging for my life. You kill us, you beat us, you rape us, you rob us, you sequester us to town and country that is underdeveloped, can't be developed. And present day, when we make something of it, then y'all want to creep in unawares
and gentrify it. Yep.
But he said, they're tearing down these, but they don't own those buildings. No. I made ignorant statements about the riots over Freddie Gray in Baltimore. Yes, because they tore up the neighborhood. Even with the killing, I can't call his name now. Knee to the neck. George Floyd.
Yeah, George Floyd. Yeah.
They tore up the community. One of the stores that my sister's co-owner of, DTLR, tore up the stores. And their response was, let's rebuild it for the community. No, we're not going to pack up and leave. We understand that this is the desperate cry of hurt people.
Yes, sir.
So we're not going to pack up like Target and Walmart threatened to do in Minneapolis.
Yeah.
We're going to pack up and leave and go somewhere else. No, we're going to rebuild, because we understand that this is the language of the oppressed. This is the language of the unheard.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Spiritualize that. People fight and buck against the systems of the church because they're tired of paying for elaborate and expensive buildings and ministries that provide nothing for their lives.
Yes, sir. Yeah, it's true. I think your sociological analysis is spot on. And it's nuanced, and we have to be able to articulate the nuance of it. In many of those communities, you're right, nothing is Black owned. It's either dominant culture owned, AKA white, or it's Asian owned. But very little of it is Black owned.
That's right.
Very little. And so when you say, and many of the homes are not owned by, they're rental homes, paying too much for inferior housing. So when people say, oh, they're tearing up their neighborhoods, well, kind of, sort of.
That's right.
Sort of, but
right.
Not really, because they don't own much of any of it.
That's
now,
right.
The flip side of that, you have to be able to, if you're a debater, you got to debate both sides of an issue. But you have burned yourself out of a place to sleep tonight, and you have burned down the one store where you can go get some bread and milk and potato chips or whatever. So you burn that down, but they didn't own it. They didn't own it, which is why it was easier to burn it down.
That's right.
But the other thing is that the volatility of that shows, and this is where we need to bring in a psychologist, not just a theologian and a sociologist, but a psychologist to talk about the psychology of racism that momentarily blinds me in my rage and anger to what I'm doing. Because I'm so mad about it, George Floyd, until at that moment, and this is where a psychologist or psychiatrist can help us, that there's a disconnect. There's a disconnect. And I think we have to be able to speak to that, study that, say something about it. Now, let's get to the other issue. Last year, a prominent female theologian wrote something on Facebook about the vestments and garments that are worn by some in the episcopacy, but let's be honest, it's worn by members of the clergy who are not part of the episcopacy. And her concern, I think rightly so, was what was it saying? What purpose did it serve? And was it hurting us more than helping us? I wrote back a rather lengthy response to try to set some of it in historical and contemporary context. You referenced His Grace, Archbishop J. Delano Ellis. I called him Father Ellis, who now sleeps. And I argued what he sought to do in bringing legitimacy to the episcopacy among African Americans. And his belief that because he often talked about the Eastern and Western streams where one received apostolic succession, being able to look back in lineage to a stream of episcopacy that authorized and legitimatized, authenticated one's episcopal service. And so he reached back to that and found in the garments of the Roman Catholic Church, to some degree, the Episcopal Church or the Church of England, the Anglican Church, the symbols of the vestments, whether it's the mitre, the coat, the cassock, the surplice, on and on, the pectoral cross, the ring, each of which have symbolic, theological, as well as ecclesiastical significance. What I do argue, and this lands me in trouble sometimes, is that I do think we have to research, study, think through the message that we're sending and the statement that we're making. And I say it this way, in all love and respect. And I wish Bishop Bellinger could get on here now, because he's one of the best at this. When you look at the majority of Pentecostal holiness, independent fellowships, reformations, denominations, almost all of them, and I'm saying that I could say all, but I won't, because there may be one or two I'm not aware of. Almost all of them are hybrid. And here's what I mean. In that they have an episcopacy that allows their bishops to still pastor local congregations. Whereas purely Episcopal, and I'm saying this in love, I hope I don't lose friends or speaking engagements, but purely Episcopal churches like the AME Zion, the CME, the Episcopal Church in America, purely Episcopal, where their bishops are Reverend Father, Reverend Mother in God. They are pastoral pastorum. They are pastors to the pastors. And so they relinquish local congregation. In the AME Zion, CME, and United Methodist, the UN, their bishops wear John Wesley robes trimmed with purple chevrons and purple fronts. They don't wear any of the garments that many of us wear. So I say that to say, first of all, it isn't everyone. Secondly, there is rational reasoning for it. Thirdly, it is a discussion we perhaps have to have as time moves on. How many enemies did I just make?
Well, I don't think you made any, because truth is truth, and if you're offended by the truth, well, then you have to look within yourself. Here's the thing: Bishop Vinton Randolph Anderson,
yes, sir,
who was in short was everything to me, and it's hard for me to just call his name without crying. He was everything to me. I have a master's of divinity degree that was paid for since I was 9 years old.
Wow.
He met me, fell in love with me as a son, paid for my degree, and told me, you are going to Payne Theological Seminary.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
End of discussion.
End of discussion.
That's it. And I tried to get out of it many, many times. And Bishop said, end of discussion, that's where you're going to school at. It's already paid for. He wrote a book after he retired in 2004, Model of a Servant Bishop.
Yes, sir. Yes,
in the book, he discusses that AME bishops or Methodist bishops are not real right reverends, because to be a right reverend is to be ordained a bishop, and that is the ordination of a third rite.
Yes.
In the Methodist Church, we are consecrated bishops. We have been set aside for the work of the episcopacy.
There you go.
And so several of his colleagues was like, hey, I'm a bishop, I'm right reverend, that's my title, I don't care what you say.
And I'm going down with it.
And I'm going down with it.
Yes.
There was one occasion where I think it was Bishop Adam Jefferson Richardson.
Yes, sir.
He was my bishop in the second when I was there. He had an Episcopal investment service as the new resident bishop of the second district.
Yes,
First
sir.
I ever seen, where he was given his own. They presented him with his own ring, crozier, and a mitre. Put his pectoral cross on it. It was an Episcopal investment service, and he's the only bishop I know who used the appropriate title as metropolitan bishop, because he was bishop of a metropolitan area.
Yes.
But
sir.
here's the thing that ruffles other folks' feathers is that because he's using the language that is uncommon.
Yes, sir.
Everybody says, well, you're being different. You're doing something different. But he's using the appropriate language. He's over DC, Baltimore, Virginia, North Carolina, and North Carolina is divided in two. North Carolina and Western North Carolina, from Raleigh up to the mountains.
Yes, sir.
And so when you use terms and symbols, people do get a little offended, but I think they're offended more so at truth than they are at the fact that somebody actually said something.
Yeah, and I think also it's a tender place and point. If you hurt your hand, I hurt my thumb the other week, and it's still tender. So to any pressure applied to it hurts because it's still tender. I think, and this is where we as pastors, preachers, practitioners have to be careful, even with our brothers and sisters, is that there are spots that are tender.
Yeah.
And so I don't get mad at people who wear certain garments. I choose not to wear certain. Bishop Bellinger knows he's probably laughing because he knows what I won't wear. But those who do, I love to see them in it, and I applaud them. I grew up in an era, I'll tell you how old I am. You know Bishop Jeffrey Leith, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Bishop Leith and I grew up, Pastor Kelly, Reverend H. Oliver Scott Jr., Norman Wallace Scott, Douglas, all of us grew up in New York together.
Yes, sir.
And Bishop Leith's dad, Reverend James F. Leith, pastored Bethel AME in Far Rockaway. So all of us were boys growing up. All of us started preaching around the same time. The first time as a kid I remember seeing an AME bishop was the late Bishop John D. Bright.
Wow.
He came to Bethel in Rockaway to preach and dedicate the new parsonage. And he had on the black robe with the purple.
Yes, sir.
So there's a part of me that judges all Episcopal attire by what I saw in that man.
Black
That's what I saw.
robe, trimmed in purple, Anglican collar,
Yeah,
got
yeah.
a pectoral cross, bishop's ring. That was
what
it.
I grew up with.
That
So
was
that's
it.
what I'm partial to.
Yes, sir. That's it. We're going to be right back, Bishop, and we're going to get to the question that I've been waiting to ask this man, because if you don't know Bishop Clarke as a preacher, you better ask somebody. We'll be right back in just a few moments.
Hi, this is Michael and Carolyn Kerr
of Image Seeker Photography. We specialize in capturing life events and treasured moments.
and you are next.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with Bishop Timothy Joseph Clarke, and I've been waiting to ask this man this question because this is what he does. Bishop, what are your thoughts about black preaching? Where are we, and where do we need to be?
Wow. Well, the first is very, very easy. Black preaching saved my life. A black preacher, hold on, took this book every Sunday and preached out of it and preached me to a place of wholeness and salvation, destiny, purpose, and call.
Yes, sir.
So that's the first thing.
Yes, sir.
And I could talk about culturally, black preaching saved Black America. The only reason we didn't commit homicide, infanticide, suicide was because of we didn't kill our children. We didn't dump them in the river, even in the darkness of slavery. We didn't go around, other than a few insurrections like, Nat Turner and John Brown. Black folk have been very nice to white people. We have not wholesale killed any of them. And we didn't commit suicide. We didn't kill ourselves. And I believe black preaching is a big reason for all three of those things not happening. Dr. Henry Louis Gates, Dr. Skip Gates, in his treatment of the Black church, both the series, and he's coming out tomorrow with a new series. Everybody needs to watch it. He highlights Wilberforce, so y'all got to watch it. And in his book on the Black church, shows how from the slave church to this current time, there's nothing that accounts for the survival and the thriving of African Americans on this continent more so than the Black church. Black church, Black educational institution, Black humanitarian services, sororities, fraternities, Masonic lodges, on and on the list goes. Black businesses, I need to add that. And so I argue with people who say there's no such thing as the Black church or Black preaching. There is. And it doesn't mean we're biased or prejudiced or segregationists in that sense of the word. It simply means that the unique predicament of an ongoing pandemic has crafted, honed, and tuned a preaching ethos
Mm.
that is unique.
Wow.
And I will not back down from that.
Wow. Wow.
The other part is, where does it need to be? We need to go back, and I may again get in trouble. And we need to redig some old wells. We do. Some of what I'm hearing in our pulpit scares me and saddens me. And we have to go back and redig some old preaching wells.
Yes, sir.
The old deacon prayed for the pastor, Lord, pick him up in your hands and dip him down in the well of your word and bring him up with preaching.
That's the prayer. That's the prayer. Yes, sir.
That's the prayer. We need to go back and start praying that some more.
Yes,
We
sir.
got to redig some old wells.
You know, here's the thing that, Dr. He taught preaching for like almost 30 years at ITC.
Oh, yeah.
Isaac Rufus Clarke.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I wish I had him as a professor, but I didn't do too shabby. I had Bishop Frederick Allen Wright Jr.
Oh, no.
So,
no.
No.
You come behind in no spiritual gift.
Yes, sir. I mean, I had Bishop Frederick Allen Wright Jr.
Yes,
Senior, and he was a student of Dr. Isaac Rufus Clarke. And so one of the things that Dr. Clarke said, best preaching is done through chosen personality.
Yes, sir.
And he also made a quote about preaching is divine drama.
Yes, sir.
It's divine drama. And I love what you said when you was preaching in the clip, the tender, notice the tender nature of the text.
Yes, sir.
And you said, if I could, I will argue this homiletically, exegetically, hermeneutically, if I wasn't, made timid by Bishop Jakes. But Bishop, we look at the text that says weeping may endure for the night, and nobody pays attention to words. And that's one of the things I love about you. You are a word person. You're an etymology person. You look at the study of words.
Yes, sir.
We get excited over the fact that weeping may endure for the night because it's the poetry. It's the King James Version. It's the poetry. Yes. Weeping may endure for the night, but joy cometh in the morning. That'll hoop by itself. It'll holler by itself. But like you said, it says it may.
It may.
Didn't say it's going to last.
No, sir.
Didn't say that it will always happen. It said it may endure. And so with preaching, we get caught up in the temporary threats of things.
Wow. I like that.
We get caught up in the temporary
threats. I like
this is temporary. What we're dealing with is temporary. But and then we lose sight of what's really eternal, or rather everlasting.
Yes, sir.
Racism is not going to go away. That's why I struggle with people who don't want to hear liberation gospel preaching. Because you don't need to do it every Sunday, but you need to hear it the discipline of the AME Church says a good pastor should at least once a month exalt his or her congregation about tithing.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
It says it should once a month.
Yes, sir.
Well, I would say you should once a month talk about those hard truths.
Yes, sir.
Preach those hard truths.
Yes, sir.
Because as you've already said, that's what kept us from losing our mind.
Yes, sir.
When we had every right to lose our mind.
Every right to lose it. And, I love that thing about temporary threats. I'm going to work on that and see if I can pull some more out of that. Because they're always around us.
Yes, sir.
And they come at us. Wow. If you look at the culture now, with the insurrection of January 6th.
Oh, yes, sir.
If you look at the vitriol and the venom and the violence that is unleashed and unloosed in our culture, if you look at the lack of vision in our government, particularly the Congress, what one could despair unless you have a historical perspective and look at what happened post-Reconstruction.
Oh, yes, sir.
And what our people went through with the rise of the White Citizens Council and the KKK, when Lincoln was martyred and little Andrew Johnson became president. and all that happened to all the senators, Hiram Revels and others who were in the Congress, in the House, in the Senate, and yet none of them were allowed to continue because of systemic, de facto, and de jure racism. So when we look back at it and we see what our forebears went through, I'm like, come on, y'all. This isn't our first time getting our ticket punched.
That's right.
We've
That's
been on this ride before.
That's right.
Yes,
We've
sir.
been here before. We've been here before. Bishop, I can't thank you enough, man. This has been an amazing conversation. And I know that this is your Sabbath day. So I want you to be able to enjoy your day of rest.
Yes, sir.
You are a devoted husband, loving father, and doting grandfather.
You know it. You know it.
And so I want you to be able to enjoy your day. Bishop, I want to thank you for taking time out to be with me today. Thank you for this conversation. This has been so enlightening, so helpful. And if you don't mind, just give us a parting thought or word to help us.
Let me say, first of all, again, how much I love you and how much I ask about you all the time. And I am concerned about you. And I'm so happy that you've landed in a good place, that the bishop has placed you in a good place. And I'm excited for your future and what God's going to do in that church. I love you, my sister, my brother, the Reverend Dr. Alphonse Allen and Lady Fran. Let me, Wednesday, we start our Berean Leadership Conference. It's going to be hybrid. So if you go on First Church or you go to Berean, you can watch the services. We've got Bishop Pat McKinstry, Dr. Jamal Harrison Bryant, Bishop Rudolph McKissick preaching in the evening. Bishop Sherman Young is lecturing from 6 to 7. I'll be teaching. I'll preach the communion sermon on Wednesday at noon and then teach every morning Thursday and Friday. So if you want to get on, please, I'd love to be able to have you on with us.
Expect me there.
What's that, sir?
Expect me there.
All right, I look for anyone that's on. Jump on and be with us. I just want to say to preachers, the times in which we live demand 3 styles of preaching: authoritative, authentic, anointed. I want you to do what an old preacher from Scotland said. You must sue the Holy Spirit. Scottish language, D. Martin Lloyd-Jones said, we use the word pursue. The Scottish say sue, seek after. You must sue the Holy Spirit so that your preaching is authoritative, authentic, and anointed. It is the only kind of preaching that's going to help turn our nation, our communities, our world upside down and right side up again. I believe in all of you and I love you and I pray for you. I'm glad we get to do ministry together. And Doc Davis, I love you, man. You mean the world to me.
Bishop, I love you too. I thank you for your genuine friendship. I thank you for your constant presence, your prayers, your concern. I always get the notification that Bishop asked about you.
Yes.
I feel this tall because one of my good friends and colleagues was just watching. He's in the process of getting his D-men. And he said to me, Edward Jones IV, he said to me, oh, Negro, you somebody. You got Bishop Clarke on your show. You somebody. And I normally I would say, oh man, whatever. No, I am somebody.
Yes.
I got Bishop. He did my show. He ain't done y'all. He did mine.
And in your life too, not just on your show, in your life.
In my life. Yes, sir. In my life. And so, Bishop, again, thank you so very much.
I love you all.
I love you, Bishop. Thank you again.
Love you. Be blessed, everyone.
So today has been a phenomenal conversation that we've been able to have with not just a legendary preacher, but a true practitioner of the gospel. And I'm so humbled and thankful that I had this chance to share in this time with Bishop Clarke. to share, to access his thoughts and his opinions and his mind. This has been a conversation with the church father, and I'm so thankful for all of you tuning in. Catch the replay if you missed it on both my personal page, the show's page, Conversation with Faith Leaders on Facebook, as well as Conversation with Faith Leaders on YouTube. I want to leave with you one more lasting and final thought before we close today. Hey, I love you, Mama Friend. Can't nobody love me like my Mama Friend does. That's my security guard. That's my road dog. That's my heart right there. I love her. I want to leave with you this thought. It is the ministry of the church to offer healing and wholeness, to build inclusive communities that reflect justice and love, and to redirect this country's social consciousness. This has been Conversation with Faith Leaders. My name is Dr. Brandon A.J. Davis. I'm the founder and host of Conversation with Faith Leaders and Content Writing Service, and I look forward to being with you next time right here. New show and time, Mondays at 3 p.m. You all take care, stay safe, wash your hands, and be sweet, sweet children.